Hello, my name is Dan Skip Allen, and this is another episode of Bleacher Features where myself and a guest, we talk about a sports movie. Obviously, I can't do this by myself. It would be kind of boring if I'd be talking into a camera by myself. So the first returning person from season 1 of Bleacher Features, my good buddy Jeremy Adams, who did Field of Dreams with me. So this will be his second Bleacher Features episode. We're going to be talking about Rocky, and I know how much you love this film as much as you did Field of Dreams.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be back. I've actually, not been doing too many shows and stuff lately, and I think, doing like the old top 5 with you back in the day was like one of the first talk shows I did about movies. So it feels good. If I'm going to be back, I'm going to be back with you talking movies again. And I love doing the sports movies with you. And these are some of the great movies you can talk about. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I have a love of sports and I have a love of movies, so I figure, what the heck, I'll put them together, we'll create a show and see if I can find some people that have a similar love. And I found a lot more people than I expected. So it's kind of a fun talking about all these different sports movies. But today we're going to be talking about Rocky, 3-time Academy Award winner, won for Best Picture in 1977, Best Director, and Best Editing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it was an interesting time. We go back to 1976 when this movie came out. It's, in the 70s. So there was a real wave of creativity, the new American Hollywood that was going on with great filmmakers. And you had Taxi Driver and All the President's Men and Network, all those movies that year. But it was this movie about, this underdog who was, trying to do something above what he thought he could do that really kind of touched people in a way. And it was almost, like, I know we'll get into it later, but Sylvester Stallone wrote this movie, kind of had in mind kind of going back to like a Frank Capra type story. And I think, in the midst of all these groundbreaking, very cynical movies, it was really touching to people to have this kind of slight throwback, idea of positivity in this time. But at the same time, there is a lot of, that 70s cynicism and edginess in this movie as well. So I think it was a good balance for people. And people are always going to argue what should have won Best Picture that year, what the greatest movie that year is. But, you can't deny the impact this one had.
No, absolutely. Absolutely right. Directed by George G. Alvinson.
John G. Alvinson.
Oh, shoot. Did I say George? Oh,
yes.
God. John G. Alvinson. Bill Conti did the music. The featured song in it is Gonna Fly Now. You got any thoughts about that stuff?
Oh, yeah. It's, this is like the Spielberg, John Williams movies. Like, you don't have this movie without the Bill Conti score. I think it's a huge part. I know people try to like put a percentage on it with the Spielberg movies. Like 30% of E.T.'s success is because of John Williams and stuff like that. I think you could play that game with Rocky. Like, how much of this movie is that score really propelling it? I don't know how much we'll get into it later, but it's interesting. I found out recently that the theme that we kind of know from the movie, the dun 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 dun, is actually a piece of classical music. It was from the Renaissance period that Bill Conti kind of threaded into the movie. It wasn't like an original piece. So it's interesting how composers will go back and take, pieces and kind of weave them in and create something new with it. So it was just, this is a guy who understood music and understood how to do things to really add to this film.
Yeah, the music for Rocky is iconic. I mean, it's one of the things you remember about Rocky is the music. And so Bill Conti definitely deserves credit for it. And of course, he didn't win anything for it, which this is the same thing, I talked about on Hoosiers. I don't want to get too much into it, but how could you not reward some of these people with Oscars? The music is incredible in the Hoosiers and in Rocky. I don't understand what music could have been better than Rocky and Hoosiers, in my opinion, but whatever. The cast, Sylvester Stallone obviously is Rocky Balboa, Talia Shire as Adrian, Burgess Meredith as Mickey, Carl Weathers, Apollo Creed, Burt Young, Polly, Tony Burton, Tony the Duke Evans.
Joe Spinell is Gazzo.
Yeah.
Throw that in there.
Uh, Jodie Letizia as Marie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a key character.
Yep.
Thayer David as Miles Jurgensen.
Yeah.
You got any thoughts about this cast?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, it's kind of a a star vehicle for Stallone. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it more, but obviously he was the struggling actor. He'd been in a few movies, but he hadn't really broken out the way that he wanted to. So he wrote this script for himself, and I think originally it was a much like darker, more cynical version of the story. But eventually he kind of had the idea to bring that more cabaret element into it. So it really is this Stallone story. It's about him, but to get this great supporting cast, not just one but multiple people that were in the Godfather films are in this, and yeah, just some great character actors, and I think also kind of a star-making role for Carl Weathers, who had been a football player and now was breaking into acting, and yeah, I think it shows a little bit of the generosity of Stallone that he didn't just make this movie about himself, but he populated it with a lot of memorable characters and really showcased these. None of these other actors except maybe Burgess Meredith were like names that people knew. These were all struggling actors, to some degree, like Stallone, and they really shine. So I think that's part of what makes this movie stand out, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you don't want to get people that would overshadow Sylvester Stallone. So you kind of get people that kind of fit into their roles in the movie, and then they all accentuate him as the lead character. Obviously, the movie starts with the Rocky theme, which we just talked about. Then he's fighting Spider Rico, which later on in future Rocky movies, we see he comes back for $40. He gets in a boxing match for $40, Jeremy.
It'll be interesting. We'll talk about it later, but the way that this is not, at this point, it's a franchise as well as just this film, and the way that the threads, these little things in this movie ripple out into the whole franchise is really kind of, I think, for Rocky fans, kind of fun. And the first scene, this character Spider Rico, it's not the last that we'll see or hear of him in the franchise. So it is kind of a cool little added thing on top of just loving this movie on its own.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rocky home alone feeding Cuff and Link his turtles. Cuff and Link. You gotta love the names of the turtles. Cuff and Link.
You gotta love like Stallone, this little like the way he kind of talks to himself, and he's always kind of having like almost this little one-man monologue that he's doing all the time, and the man, if you two could learn to sing and dance, I wouldn't have to do all this. It's a memorable moment with the turtles, and I think that's part of the charm of the movie is Rocky's little monologue. He almost reminds me in a weird way of Popeye. Like he's always talking. He's got this little one-man show going all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rocky at the pet store with Adrian. This is the first time he meets Adrian in the movie, but obviously he knew her beforehand because she had bought his turtles from her. So he
knew her. He was friends with her brother. So yeah.
Yeah. So then Rocky's works for a strong-arm man named Mr. Gazzo. He collects debts for the guy. This is going to come back as well. We'll hear some lines of dialogue about this eventually. Chauffeur insults Rocky. Gazzo asks why he didn't break the guy's thumbs. Look, he's a strong-arm guy. He doesn't break the guy's thumbs, so we see that he actually has a heart. And the bad guy said, "Hey, go break the guy's thumbs," and you don't go break the guy's thumbs, and you better watch out.
It's interesting that he is this guy who's basically working for a gangster, but he isn't like that. He doesn't have that. He's not like a character from The Godfather, but interestingly, the guy playing Gazzo is from The Godfather. He played Willie Chichi, one of Michael's enforcers. And then I think another interesting thing you hear is how the driver guy is just so mean to Rocky all the time, and it just kind of shows that even though he's a boxer and he's somebody that punches people, like people don't really fear him. He doesn't have much respect in this community.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So Rocky goes to the gym. Lock combination doesn't work. Not allowed to use a locker anymore. Another guy's stuff is in Rocky's locker. Mickey insults Rocky, and then the guy named Dipper who got his locker says, "I dig your locker." So that's
Oh,
the
man.
no pun intended, that's a dig towards Rocky. Like, hey, think I love your rock after he gets his rocker taken away from, which, it's a sad moment for Rocky at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. It's all these little things that they're doing to just show what an underdog he is. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, you get to a certain point in this movie, it's like, how could this guy ever achieve anything? They've set all of this up in all these smart little small ways to show that.
Yeah. Then Rocky, he's back at the pet store with Adrian again. And then Rocky talks to Paulie about his sister. My sister's dried up, which, that's not a nice thing to say about your sister. My sister's all dried up. I'm like, damn, man.
Yeah.
So then we go to Apollo. Be a thinker, not a stinker. Stay in school and carry a briefcase. He's doing a commercial or something like that. So that was kind of funny. That, when you become a star, you start doing commercials and you do advertisements and stuff.
They're setting up what a showman, like, that's the number one defining characteristic of Apollo, is he's this public persona as much as anything else. And which I think, it kind of was evoking where Muhammad Ali had been in the culture. I think that's kind of the main influence for that character.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so this is a good scene because this is going to play in future Rocky movies as well. Rocky rescues a girl on the corner. Girl says, "F you, creepo." Guy backs out of fight with Apollo Creed because of injury. So Marie is the girl's name, and if people are watching, Marie shows up in a future Rocky movie, same as Spider Rico. So you gotta love how these characters who appeared in this movie, little small characters, they show up in future movies, and we see where their character has been. It's nice how he gives back to the characters, the actors, the people that are involved in his movies.
And this is a character that, again, has no respect for Rocky. Like, he has no
girls.
Even in his little community, he has no respect from the people, even the kids.
He helps her out, and then she calls the "F you, creepo." Like, oh, thanks, Marie. And then, of course, Apollo Creed's opponent backs out, so they have to find a new fighter from Philadelphia because that's where the fight is going to be. So they figure, well, we'll get a local guy that'll maybe draw some people to the fight, since the fight.
And the historical context of this being 1976, so it was the bicentennial. Yeah, so that kind of really plays into everything. And
absolutely.
It's we weren't really around as much then, so we may not remember, but I think this was a big moment in the culture and stuff. We actually, in California, there's a dam that I drive by sometimes that still says 1976 bicentennial on it. So it was it was a big thing for people then, and I think it's an interesting thing that they use to propel the story here.
I occasionally will get a quarter. People still.
You'll see that. Yeah, exactly.
So once again, insults again from Gazzo's chauffeur. Rocky goes to Paulie's house for Thanksgiving. Rocky picks up Adrian. Paulie throws turkey out in the street. Adrian cries, "It's Thanksgiving." Adrian says it's Thanksgiving. So this whole frustration with Paulie, with Adrian not wanting to get with Rocky, this whole kind of triangle that's been going on with the three of them. And it comes to a head on Thanksgiving of all days.
Yeah, it's interesting with Paulie. Like, I've heard people say, like, the way that he mistreats Adrian and stuff is really just he's frustrated with himself. He's just this, kind of somewhat alcoholic, frustrated character. And I think we see in Paulie the character that Rocky could be, and that, like, Rocky doesn't want to end up like that. And it's interesting that would be like his best friend. And it's like, these different shades in these characters. But yeah, it's a little rough to watch. I think even now, like, more so now, it's rough to watch the way that Paulie acts. But that's, I'm sure how realistic that is. Like, I had, my grandfather and people in my family that were kind of they took out their frustrations on other people in the family, and is just an accurate view of, I think what goes on in these communities.
No, absolutely. And then to finish that whole thing up, to me, it's just Thursday. So that was the whole thing. To you, it's Thanksgiving. To me, it's just Thursday. So that was kind of funny. So Rocky smooths things over with rink manager and convinces him to let them go on the ice for 10 minutes. So Rocky basically goes on a date with Adrian after the whole Thanksgiving thing, and he takes her out skating. Of course, he's not skating. She's skating. He's like kind of running, walking alongside of her.
And the one thing we haven't brought up yet is, this was an extremely low budget movie. This wasn't like a big prestige picture that, that was destined to win all the Oscars. This was like the little movie that could, kind of like Rocky himself. And there's a lot of these wonderful moments in the movie that were, because of the budget. And this is one where originally they were going to have a skating rink with all these people. It was going to be full, but then they're like, we can't afford the extras and everything. So they had to rewrite the script to come up with this thing where he pays the guy to let him and Adrian go in alone. And I think it makes it so much better. It adds so much like character to that scene. And you'll see a lot of those little things throughout the movie where it's like, we got to come up with stuff because we don't have the budget and everything. And I love those little moments in like indie movies where the creativity comes out of the limitations.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Explains the origins of being a southpaw to Adrian. Nobody wants to fight a southpaw. Mm-hmm. Rocky's father and Adrian's mother said opposite things to one another. Rocky, I'm at least half a bum. All right. So this whole thing about, I like that he's explaining the southpaw, but this whole thing about Adrian's mother said, you got to look good. You got to do this because, you need people to come find you. You need people to be attracted to you because you're kind of not the best looking person in the world. And in Rocky, his father, it's like, hey man, you got to be tough. You got to do this. You got to, because that's the only way
you're not
anything in the world.
Because you're not a smart guy, It's like their parents didn't, they were, I think, kind of not even correct. Like, she's not ugly, and he's not the brightest bulb on the tree, but he's not a complete idiot. So it just shows how the things that our family tells us, they stick in our heads, and we start to believe those things about ourselves. And it's nice how these two people kind of get each other out of those mindsets and see that they can be more. And I think when you have a good connection with somebody, that can happen. So I love the way that Stallone wrote all of this with these characters.
Absolutely. So he says, I'm at least half a bum, which he's kind of talking bad about himself, which we know he's not half a bum. But morning after the fight is the worst. Never broke his nose in 64 fights. Rocky invites Adrian inside his apartment. Adrian says she wants to go, but eventually comes in anyway. Rocky tells Polly through the window Adrian is with her, which I love that. They're in the apartment, and she's like, well, my brother doesn't know where I am when I'm, hey, Polly, Adrian's with me.
I'll call him. I'll give him a call.
I love that.
They've kind of referenced that many times in The Simpsons, where people will be like yelling at each other through windows. It's a funny idea. But this I've heard a lot of different opinions on this scene. Like, maybe it doesn't play as well. Like, it's not as politically correct today, and how Rocky kind of like forces Adrian in there against his will, and like you can look at it that way. I think that I think that Adrian does want to be there, and I think that she's having a tough time coming out of her shell, and I think that you see that in Talia Shire's performance. So I can see where people have an issue with the scene, but for me, I do think that maybe he's a little more forceful than he needs to be, but I think that Talia Shire plays it in a way that I'm kind of with her character, and it isn't like as creepy as it might be to some other people.
Well, I think he sees her at Thanksgiving. He sees her, how shy she is. I think he's trying to help her get a little bit of courage and whatnot, but not do it in a mean way or nothing.
Yeah.
But so she tells Rocky she doesn't know him well enough to be in a man's apartment alone. Says she's not comfortable. Rocky says the same thing back to her. They kiss and fall to the floor. So Rocky is just as nervous as she is in this situation.
Yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
will say his apartment is so gross, though.
Yeah,
Like, they went out of their way to make his disgusting. That I think that makes the scene a little like ooh for people, but no, for me, it. You know, you can see from the scene before these two connecting, and I think that it works for me. So
yeah. No, I mean, you got to remember the year it was, the neighborhood Rocky lived in. He's not
yeah,
the richest guy in the world. He's really not that rich.
yeah.
He's kind of poor, so he's not going to live in the most expensive
Oh
place.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So, to me, it makes sense that he lives in kind of a.
And again, we have to really appreciate Talia Shire's performance here, because this is after she did 2 Godfather movies and was such a different character with Connie in those films, and then to be so convinced. I mean, you're completely convinced that she's this, character that has no self-esteem and is just hiding away from the world, and then you see her this arc where she kind of comes out of her shell in this movie, and it's a really wonderful performance that maybe doesn't get as much of a due as it should, I would say.
She's kind of like a schlumpy character, if you know.
Yeah.
So
It's
Mickey,
not at all like who Talia Shire was. I mean, obviously,
No.
so it's really great, character work.
Yeah. So Mickey gives Rocky a message from Miles, and then insults him about his choices in life once again. So the basically the message from Miles Juergens got back to Rocky through Mickey about Apollo Creed needing a fighter.
Well, he thinks originally he wants sparring, like he thinks he's going in to be a sparring partner.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Juergens offers Rocky a chance at fighting Apollo Creed for the heavyweight championship in January. Rocky at first turns him down. Then Apollo announces fight at press conference. Rocky does a shout out to Adrian at press conference. So he like you said, he goes in thinking he's going to be the sparring partner for Apollo. Turns out he's the actual opponent of Apollo.
I love his reaction when he asks him. He's just like, no. It's a great moment for Rocky. Like, you would think, he'd have a different reaction, but I love that moment from Stallone. He's like, oh, you want to fight the champ? He's like, no. And then I also love him at the conference. He's so not of this world at all that Apollo is of, with Pump Up the Fight. They're like, what derogatory thing do you have to say about Apollo? And he's like, he's great. It's just, I love Stallone in those scenes.
He doesn't want to say nothing mean to anybody.
He doesn't know what derogatory means. So
yeah. So then Rocky turns down Polly's help after Adrian insults him. So they're in Polly's house, and Adrian insults her brother, and then Rocky turns down his help. So Polly's not a happy camper at this point in the movie. So what happens is I think they get thrown out. I don't know if they get completely.
She's screaming, he's yelling, and then he throws them out. And then that leads to, I think, one of my favorite Adrian moments in the movie, where she comes to Rocky and she's like, do you need a roommate? I love that moment. And I think that, like, issues you have with the earlier scene, I think, are kind of redeemed in that moment with her taking that initiative and really finally kind of getting out of this abusive situation that she's in with Paulie. I think it's I really love that whole sequence.
So then Rocky admits stuff at the press conference from Apollo Creed bothered him. I didn't get into that part of it, but we know how Apollo is, and that's Apollo's that type of person, and so he kind of said some stuff that wasn't necessarily nice about Rocky, and then eventually Rocky comes up and says, it did bother him, the stuff he was saying. So, and then here, this is what loyalty gets you here, Jeremy. Gazzo gives Rocky $500 for training. Mickey comes to visit Rocky at his apartment. Gazzo, who he's been working for, he understands that the kid's going to need some help, and he gives him $500. And then, of course, the guy who's been insulting him, the guy who's rude to him, he now puts his tail between his legs, and he comes to try to get his help. Try to say, hey, come on, you want me to help you out.
It's interesting, like the first turning of the tide is in the community. Like, he had no respect in the community, and now it's like people are starting to be on his side all of a sudden. And I think that's the first step toward, we're going to see the ascent that Rocky has. First, you get the people in your community and the people that are close to you the first ones that give you respect before you can get it from the world at large. I like the way it kind of builds that way.
Yeah. Mickey tells him he has to be careful about this chance. You can't blow this chance. It's a once in a lifetime chance. Says he needs a manager. Okay. And then Rocky sees a Rocky Marciano poster in Rocky's apartment, says he reminds him of him, which, I knew that going into the movie.
Yeah.
They're very similar. Rocky tells Mickey he needed his help 10 years ago, which, you saw that coming. Rocky wasn't just going to, oh, now you want to be my manager after the way you've been treating me? Yeah, I needed a manager 10 years ago, But
I think we skipped the earlier part where Mickey was like, you could have been, you had potential, but then you decided just to be a leg breaker. So I think Mickey had kind of had this thing with Rocky where he did know his potential. He did want to train him, but he felt like he was making choices in his life that he didn't agree with. So there's been this tension. But this is probably the scene of the movie. Like, this is the performance between these two guys. And I'm sure you can relate to, you've got two men and they both have a lot of pride. And it's like, they're butting against each other. It's like they both want, each other. They both want the other one to be, on their side. And, he definitely wants Mickey to train him and Mickey wants to train him, but there's all this pride and stuff in the way. And it's kind of how men are, sometimes they have to kind of like butt heads and you scream like this, before they can, get to the point where they're actually working together.
Yeah. So Mickey says, why didn't you ask? And Rocky says he did ask. Rocky yells at Mickey as he's leaving, runs after Mickey down the street. Rocky gets up early, starts to train. So basically, he's like, oh, why did I do that? He runs after him, and he's like, well, I actually do need a trainer. And of course, so he runs after him and basically forgives him. And then this is one of the classic movie scenes of all time right here. Mm-hmm. Rocky gets up early, starts to train, eats egg yolks, runs in 28-degree weather, punches meat in the freezer. You gotta love. Being a boxer does not seem that glamorous, does it, Jeremy?
Yeah, but we got to mention how this kind of launches the movie montage to a degree, at least the sports like training montage. Yep. Like we had montages in movies before. There were a lot in like movies in the 60s, like Bonnie and Clyde and Butch Cassidy and stuff like that. But something about this one, him training and that, the particular piece of music, the song Gonna Fly Now is, I don't think this scene, I think in a lot of ways creates what we had in the 80s. Like this is such an influential moment in cinema. And to me, a lot of people talk about like Eye of the Tiger as being the iconic Rocky song, but to me, it'll always be this one, Gonna Fly Now. I think this is like this is the most like motivational, see, this is I used to be a runner. Like these are actually my running medals right here, which, thank you, Rocky, for giving me inspiration to run these races, even though I have asthma. So that was like, look, a small Rocky moment for me was running like these half marathons and stuff. And that was always one of the key things I would listen to when I was running was Gonna Fly Now. So, I think this is the great Rocky song in the whole franchise.
Yeah, good point about the montage. Because you see montage in sports movies all the time now, but then you don't realize.
And it really does. It tells the story because you see the whole community starting to rally behind him, and it's like he's not a joke anymore. The little kids are running with him, and people are like waving at him and all this stuff. And obviously, Paulie, let him come into the meat factory and punch on the sides of meat, and that even that little thing ends up on the news, and all the like things are really changing, and they're really telling the story in different ways.
Yeah. So Polly asks about Rocky's relationship with Adrian. Is he having sex with her? Rocky gets upset with him. Of course, no one's you don't ask me about my sex life. Don't be, I know it's your sister, but don't be asking me.
Some people just don't have boundaries.
Yeah, they just don't. Yeah. So Adrian tries to kiss him. Rocky tells Adrian he can't fool around while training. This is the classic boxing thing. Yeah. You don't fool around with your girlfriend, wife, whatever.
It's because of Mickey, right? Mickey earlier says women weaken legs or something like that. Yep. So this is like this idea that Mickey put in his head.
Yep. Women weakens their legs. I had it right here.
Yeah.
So, and then and then I love this. String training helps Rocky with his balance. This is where Mickey comes in. He gets him to do the string training with his feet, and it helps him with his balance. See, that's why having a good manager helps. But yeah, women weaken legs. That's what Mickey says. Adrian visits Rocky, brings him Butt-Kiss to run with him in the morning while training.
We haven't mentioned Butt-Kiss yet.
Yeah,
my favorite character is the bulldog that he gets from the pet shop earlier in the movie. Yeah,
great. He gets a dog. You're right. I didn't mention that, but so now he's got someone to run with him. He's got the dog to run with him, so that's good. So TV crew comes to Rocky while training. Rocky invented pounding raw meat. So this is kind of funny. I invented pounding meat. There's a joke in there somewhere. We will not go there. But yeah, so I invented. Where did you come up with the meat? The reporter. I invented pounding raw meat. I'm like, okay, all right, we'll leave it at that. The Duke sees newscasts and tells Apollo about Rocky's fight and hitting the meat. Apollo sloughs him off. This is really good because Apollo's over there talking on the phone, talking about officials or doing whatever, and the Duke is watching the TV and he's watching Rocky.
He's like, I think we might have a problem here, and I just love him. He's like, he's a southpaw nothing. I'll drop him in 3. I just love that line that Apollo has. It just shows his, pride comes before a fall a little bit. It's great stuff.
Yeah, the Duke's like, oh my God. So Paulie overheard Rocky and Adrian talking about him. He gets very mad at them. Adrian gets mad back at him. Finally, Adrian's sticking up for herself. And then Rocky gets involved here. Rocky's standing up for his girl, even if it's his buddy Paulie, Yeah. We said there was a triangle here. There's kind of a triangle between these three. Mickey, he's going to eat thunder and shit lightning. I mean,
I think it says crap lightning, but yeah.
Yeah. I love some of the stuff Mickey says.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to get into any other like sports movies or other other boxing movies, but one of the better kind of characters in sports movies is Mickey. Who says he's going to eat lightning and crap thunder? What was it? He's gonna eat thunder and shit lightning. I mean, what a freaking line! What a classic line from Mickey. And he's got this personality to him that you just don't forget him as a character in this movie. And he's one of the better characters in all the sports movies.
Yeah, and I don't think he was the first actor that they went through. They went to some other more name actors for that role, but I mean, it's Burgess Meredith. I think is so iconic, and it's just amazing, how that can happen. And this, aging guy who had been in movies in the 30s and 40s was in Of Mice and Men back in the 30s, and it just kind of fall into doing the little bit parts. He was in the Batman TV show and stuff, but just a wonderful moment to come. This guy's in his 70s and he gets this role, and it's iconic as it is.
Yeah. Then here we go with the "Gonna Fly Now" song while training montage. And Rocky visits arena before fight. Poster is wrong. While white shorts and red stripe, not red shorts with white. Once again, he gets disrespected. The poster's wrong. He's wearing the wrong shorts.
And again, I found out this is one of those low budget things where that was something that actually happened. Like the production design people just made the wrong colors. They made the wrong thing on the poster. So then they're like, well, let's make it part of the story then. This is him still being disrespected. So it was one of those happy accidents, kind of like the skating rink, that I think adds to the movie in small ways.
Yeah, no, you're right. And the montage is great because then you get the whole city basically behind him.
And then we didn't mention the most iconic thing of him running up the steps. And then eventually there would actually be a Rocky statue there. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is one of the great sports scenes in any sports movie ever, is him running up the steps, and eventually then they would put the statue right there. And everybody that goes to Philadelphia, I've never been to Philadelphia, they say they always go up them steps and they always do the whole.
Yeah.
But now,
I mean, the way that the city, embraced this
racism.
movie, this is, such a part of that, of Philadelphia now, and I love the again, eventually they go back to Philadelphia in the franchise, and even Creed is in Philadelphia, and you like see a different side of the city in Creed, and I just love those echoes throughout the franchise.
No, you're absolutely right. So now we're at the day before the fight. Rocky admits to Adrian that he can't beat him, which really you never see this in Rocky, the whole movie, that he admits that he doesn't think he could do it. Because he's just that type of guy. He's an upbeat guy, and he wants to try to do the best he can. And he finally, the one person he admits to that he thinks he won't be able to do it is Adrian, which gotta love that he confides in her of all people.
But the amazing thing, I think, what makes this movie so special, and I think kind of set a new tone for sports movies was, well, what can he do? If he can't beat him, what can he do? And it's like, well, I just want to go the distance. I don't want to get knocked out in 2 rounds. I want to show that I can actually go, the full distance of the rounds with this fighter. And I think that's an inspirational thing in and of itself, knowing your limitations, but within that, what's the absolute best that you can do within your limitations? Pushing yourself. It's not about having an unrealistic goal that you're trying to achieve. It's about pushing yourself to the utmost. What's the highest level that I can do, and doing that, and not being, giving into the fear and the stuff that his dad told him or that other people have said, or his own fears. Just being like, no, I know what I'm capable of doing and achieving to do that. And I think that was kind of a new thing in sports movies that you see going forward, that I think it became kind of the rallying cry. We're going to do our best and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. I couldn't have said that any better. You did great job on that.
And that to me, we haven't really mentioned it before, but unlike you, I'm not a big sports guy. I've probably watched maybe 2 boxing matches in my whole life, but that to me goes beyond sports or beyond any of that idea of pushing yourself, that having something that you're passionate about and trying to go the distance with it has, motivated me my whole adult life. And that goes beyond just like, this is something that a movie like a sports film, like a Rocky, can give to you, no matter where you are, what your particular, things, what you're into, whether it is sports or whether it's something different, like me with, wanting to be involved in movies and, the film community in some way like that. It goes beyond that. It speaks to you. And, Rocky is a great movie. So it's inspiring me as a movie as much as it is a sports sort of thing.
Yeah. And I'll take the ball from you, and I'll say it's about, in my life, I've had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of struggles. And one of the things I say to myself in my, don't quit. Don't quit. Like jobs and things like that. I will not quit. Things, I've had problems on jobs and things like that, but I won't quit. And so I look, you take it from Rocky, and he's not a quitter, and he had a realistic goal. I just want to go to distance, and you try to set goals for yourself in life and on jobs and so forth and like that. And Rocky really is a good movie for that kind of thing.
And it's nice how, he has this go the distance speech in this, and then later you go to Rocky Balboa, and he gives, probably my second favorite speech in movies to his son in Rocky Balboa about, it's not about how hard you get hit, or not about how hard you hit, but about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And I think like these two a young Rocky and then an older Rocky, these two speeches kind of like complement each other, and they're like the so motivational, and again, his son wasn't a boxer. He wasn't really talking about boxing. He was talking about life. He was talking about how his son had become cynical and kind of like had a defeatist, negative attitude in his life, and he had a chip on his shoulder, and he was like, don't approach life that way. You can set a goal and do that, and don't be, a quitter, like you said. And, these movies inspire you beyond the subject matter. There's something larger that they can give to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So now here we are, the day of the fight. Rocky compliments Adrian, asks her to wish him luck, says he's going to need it. Meat Packing Company patch on the back of his robe, Shamrock Meat Packing Co. So
Shamrock Meats, yep.
Shamrock Meat Packing Co. That was a little thing that Polly did for him that hey,
Yeah.
I can help you out. I can get you some sponsors and this and that. So that was one of the things Pollock says, I
And
can help you. And then we end up getting the sponsorship.
yeah, everybody in this movie is kind of finding their lane, and I like that. Like Paulie's got a little bit of a flair for marketing, and he
Yeah.
finds that's something that he can do and he can contribute. And you see him, at his least jerkish at that point. Like he's
Yeah.
actually doing something that isn't that he can do. And you see how Adrian, finds her strength, and everybody, like, it's like Rocky's inspiring other people and they're inspiring him. And I think it's a movie about a community and about these group of people as much as it is just about Rocky. So that's a nice little thing that they do. And he's a real jerk, but he's complicated, and he still has his good points that he can grow.
It's like that family member.
Yeah.
It's your jerk. Nobody else is a jerk. It's your jerk.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Philly itself. Like,
yeah,
like there maybe there's some jerks in Philly, but they're very proud city at the same time.
Yeah. All right. So Apollo dressed up as George Washington. You brought that up, the bicentennial, in a boat on his way to the ring. Says,
I love this so much.
Says, I want you. Says he wants the stallion, and then he says Creed in 3. Creed in 3. So this whole showboat mentality that he comes out to the ring in, with, like you said, the bicentennial and Philly and all that stuff. Then Joe Frazier comes out to meet the fighters before the fight. Rocky,
he was from Philly, so that was an awesome thing.
So Rocky, then Rocky knocks down Apollo Creed in the first round. Then he has a kind of a tough second round. Rocky does. Then we go through a bunch of the rounds here: 7th round, 13th round, 14th round. We don't have a lot going on. So Apollo knocks Rocky down in the 14th round. So now we're in the final round, the 15th round here, Jeremy. Rocky's blind in one eye and has a broken nose. And earlier in the movie, what does he say? Proud. He had 64 fights and never
had my nose broken. Boy, I wonder if that was a setup for something later.
Yeah. So he ends up getting a broken nose in this fight. So then Rocky's pounding on Apollo's ribs. Apollo says, ain't going to be a rematch. I'm going to love that. It ain't going to be a rematch. Rocky says, I don't want one.
I don't want one.
These guys had enough of each other in this one fight. They're like, nah, no more fights for us. Then Rocky yells, Adrian. Adrian runs to Rocky in the ring. She says, I love you. Apollo wins fight by a split decision. So just talk about the end of that movie there, Jeremy. What are your thoughts there?
Well, first, I think we have to talk about the fight. Like, there's different stories about, what was going on behind the scenes. Like, Stallone says that he, choreographed everything. But one story I heard from John Avildsen, the director, was that they started doing the scene and it was kind of a mess. Like, it wasn't really working. So he told Stallone, go and write out the whole scene, write out, every hit, everything that's going to happen. And it was almost like thinking of it almost like a dance scene, like he would choreograph a dance scene. So Stallone, kind of choreographed it, bit by bit. And they were, one thing we haven't really talked about yet is there was new technology being developed in this time. And one of the new things was the Steadicam. So there's the shot on the steps earlier where this camera's going around Rocky, and it's like a handheld camera, and you get some more of that, we're in the ring with them in this fight, and they were doing new technology, new techniques to try to get you more involved and not having just watching this from outside, like a stationary thing, but being really you're there in the fight with them. And there's just so many things that the filmmaking crew was doing, that Stallone was doing, that I think made this really feel vital and revolutionary. And I don't think it's the best fight in the franchise, but I think it kind of set the template, for these great. We're going to be looking forward to these great fights, and more than anything else, it's character based, and it isn't just we're really engaged. Even if technically it isn't the most realistic, or there, so you can see parts where they're not even hitting each other and it's, a little goofy. You're so into the character and into the emotion of it that it really that I think really set a new standard too. What do you think when you go back and watch this fight scene? Like, I know you're a sports guy. You've watched a lot of boxing, so what do you feel like when you watch the scene now?
Well, it's a movie, and it's not
Yeah.
really a indicative of a real boxing match. But
Mhm.
like you said, it is a dance between these two characters. And
Yeah.
to us, the viewer of the movie, we that's the kind of stuff we would rather have watching a movie than an actual boxing match, because a lot of times boxing matches can be boring. And
Yeah.
so this dance that these guys are having with Apollo's whole charisma and all this stuff, and Rocky just trying to survive, is effective in the end result of the movie to me. And that's why I really enjoy this fight. But obviously, like you said, other fights in other Rocky movies are better. But I think this one wasn't as much about the fight as it was about the story of Rocky
Yeah.
and his supporting characters in the movie. I thought that was the main objective, to get this story across. And just so people don't know, this is based on a real person.
Yeah.
And I know his first name is Chuck, and I can't think of the
Yeah.
guy's last name right now. I've been trying to think about the guy's name the whole movie, the whole
Yeah,
thing.
they made a movie about him with
Yep.
Liev Schreiber. I'm trying to
Yes,
remember
they
his
did.
name. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Rocky basically took a real life person and wrote this script.
He went the full rounds with Muhammad Ali, right? It was a Muhammad Ali fight that this nobody Italian guy, came out of nowhere to actually take the champ, the distance. So that's kind of where Stallone got the idea for it.
And
Is it what? It's something like Wessel, something like that.
I
I'm
can't
trying to
remember.
remember. I know it starts with the W.
I should have looked it up before doing this, but
You've seen that movie, the Liev
yes,
Schreiber one. That's a good movie. I haven't seen that one.
good. Very good movie. Very good
Yeah.
movie. It's very underrated. It came out in May, which is like the worst time for this movie.
Yeah.
In the summer blockbuster, so you put a little indie movie about the real life that a guy based on Rocky. I mean, that's the worst time for this movie to be put out. And go ahead.
Yeah, and again, like my favorite, fights in the Rocky franchise are the ones where you're really invested in the characters. And if you go all the way to the end of the franchise with Creed 2, I think that they wonderfully set up, we're invested in both of those characters in Victor Drago's son and in Adonis Creed, and they both have things that they're trying to achieve and prove, and you're invested in those characters. And I think that the Rocky franchise is at its best when it kind of goes back to the first movie and sees, it's really about being invested in the story with the characters and stuff.
Yeah. So and then the end. I mean, it's one of the all-time, one of the great quotes of movie history, Adrian, and then she wanted. I mean, how can you not? Just love
it?
It
really is a great love story. It really is. And, I don't think it's ever going to be on like a love story list with all the romantic comedy movies, but really it kind of should be, because that's really what the movie ultimately ends on, is their love. And I think it's really interesting that you barely even hear the announced decision that Apollo won. It's like so you're hearing these two characters in the forefront, and it's kind of like off in the background you see Apollo like jump up. He's excited because he got the decision, but that's like so not what the movie really cares about. It's not what Rocky was going for, and he gets everything that he wanted, and he achieves what he was going to achieve. And again, that's such a good message, and it was something so new, I think.
Yeah. Obviously, there's two questions. We kind of, got into it a little bit, but I'm going to ask these two questions anyway. Why does Rocky stand up today, 44 years later, in today's society? And then also, what about this film resonates with you, and why is it a film that you wanted to come and talk about with me? And I know you're not the biggest sports fan, but you love your sports movies. So you just you did Field of Dreams with me last year, and you're doing Rocky with me this year. So those two questions.
Yeah, to answer the second question, like these movies they have something more to like. Well, they've got great actors and great stories. Like any movie that I go for, I'm looking for a good story with some great acting. So they give you that, but there's something that you take away from them. Like Field of Dreams really is about a relationship between a father and a son, and this really is about it's about finding the right people in your life and setting a goal for yourself, that you feel that you can achieve to. And like I said, these are messages that are always going to speak to you. And just for me personally, I don't think I watched the Rocky movies as a kid. I think that I'd seen, I knew of them, and like there were like toys from Rocky 3 and Rocky 4 and stuff like that when I was a kid. But I don't think I actually watched Rocky until maybe I was 16 or 17 for the first time. And thankfully, it was the first one that I watched. Like, I think I pretty much did watch them in order. So, yeah, just coming to it as a teenager, I think it was I was at the right age to get to this movie and really see, what a great film it is. And, I've since then loved the franchise. Excuse me. And yeah, it's up there in my top 5 of franchises, I think, which is crazy because I'm not a big sports guy. So yeah, there's just something personal in it that speaks to me. And I think around that same time is when I discovered First Blood as well, which is such a great movie. So Stallone, he was onto something.
Oh yeah.
And to answer your first, why does it resonate? I mean, I don't know. I mean, the messages and the themes resonate, and I just think the movie was at the right time in our period, and you can't divorce. Like it's just a part of our culture now. I mean, it's indicative with American culture. Like the Rocky, we'll still say today, like he had his Rocky moment, or he's like a Rocky. That's just, I think that's always going to be with us. The movie just it was at that moment to make that splash.
Yeah, and my thoughts are that in the '70s, the '70s was like an underdog decade. If you look at a lot of the movies, they were about underdog characters that really were down on their luck, had really struggled, whether it be with their family, their relationships, mental health. And Rocky was kind of a down on his luck guy. You could see it through Gaza in The Chauffeur. You could see it through Mickey. You could see it through Paulie. You could see it through some of these characters. And he just needed something, and it was getting this fight to start building his life up and getting things going in the right direction. And I think as a kid who grew up and struggled my entire life and had 2 brothers and a sister, and we struggled as a family in the '70s and the early '80s, to say, okay, even though you have a tough life and you have a tough upbringing, doesn't mean you can't. Some things can start going your way, and some positive things can happen in your life, and things could start, that snowball effect, to get better and better and better. And that's where Rocky really comes in for me. And I think millions of people, thousands of people, where you could relate to the underdog story, because it relates to life. Because we're not all born with a silver spoon. We're not all rich and famous and stuff. You just kind of, a lot of people just come from a real menial background, and I was one of those people. And so that's where it really affected me as a kid growing up. Not only was I a huge sports fan, so I love that aspect, but it was the down and out and the building yourself up from nothing kind of thing aspect that really resonates with me. You got anything else did you want to say? Or did you just...
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought, we have to talk about the franchise, I think. I mean, we're talking about Rocky, and like I have to know, like, what are your favorite of the series? Like, what are your favorite movies and your least favorite movies in the series? Well, and what do you think? What do you think about it overall, and what just going on as a franchise, where the character goes?
Well, I love the franchise. I mean, it's one of my favorite franchises too, because it's about just a guy in his life and his upbringing, and it ends up he has a gift of being a boxer. But yeah, I love Rocky 1. I mean, I will always pick Rocky 1 as the number 1 movie in the franchise. People say, he won in Rocky 2. Yeah, but that is great, and I'm happy for it. But the fact of the matter is, Rocky is the real story, the real movie that really says something about people and society and life.
Yeah.
And then you can't not love, and maybe it's considered quote unquote a guilty pleasure, but I just cannot love. I just cannot not say I love Rocky IV. I absolutely love Rocky IV. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like hitting on every nerve in the country at the time it came out. You know, I mean, it was the perfect movie, the perfect topic, the perfect setting, the perfect everything for us to say, okay, America versus Russia. You know, by this point, Rocky's the rich guy. He's got the money. He's got the light. They got the gadgets and the nice house. And who's the guy down on his luck? It's the poor Russian guy who was living in the Cold War. Yeah. And it really flips it on its head by Rocky IV. The franchise does in a lot of ways. Do you agree or not?
Oh, yeah, and I love how Rocky is kind of the quintessential 70s movie, and Rocky IV is the quintessential 80s. Like, you can't get more 80s than that movie.
No.
Yeah, I would agree it's a little more on the guilty pleasure side, but if you're a Rocky fan, you can't help but love it. What do you think about when they brought the franchise back with Creed? Like I thought that was such a brilliant way to bring it back. When Stallone had said, Rocky was done with Rocky Balboa, I just think it was amazing how Ryan Coogler had this idea to bring the franchise back with these characters. And yeah, I love those movies too. Like, what do you think about where the franchise has gone in this new direction?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I wasn't in the camp of, yeah, let's have more Rocky movies with Apollo Creed's son. I wasn't one of those guys.
Yeah.
I was so invested in the Stallone character. And Rocky VI kind of was a little bit of a letdown for me, even though there was some themes in Rocky VI that I really liked.
It's actually one of my favorites, but yeah, I could get like, it's not the best made movie, but for me, I think it's one of the truest to the character. But it would have been a good end to the story. So yeah, I think a lot of us were like, what they're doing something new with, why are they not just letting it end? But what do you think of the Creed movies now, having seen them?
Well, I really love Creed, and I'm not the biggest fan of Creed 2, but I haven't really revisited it since I saw it in the theater on my press screening. Yeah. So I guess I have to go back to it and sit down and watch it by myself and just kind of see what is going on within the movie a little bit better. Because sometimes you can get lost in a movie when you're in a movie with a crowd and they're cheering or they're booing or they're whatever's going on. And I really haven't revisited Creed 2 since that press screening that I had. So I would like to go back to these movies again, and I'm definitely going back to Creed. This is going to be a bookend. This will be the last episode of season 2 of Bleacher Feature. And the first episode of season 3 is going to be Creed.
Well, I look forward to seeing that one because, that's actually my second favorite Rocky movie is Creed. Just to tell you there. It's Rocky is my first, and then Creed, and then, maybe Rocky 2. And to me, they're all different shades of great except for Rocky 5. Like, all of the Rocky movies are great, and then there's Rocky 5 kind of off on its own.
Tommy Morrison, grandson of John Wayne.
Yeah.
John Wayne, right? You knew that, right?
What now?
Tommy Morrison was the grandson of John Wayne.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because his name's Marion Morrison. Yeah, people forget that about John Wayne, yeah.
Yeah. So, so you could look forward to that on the third season of Bleacher Features. And my guest, won't give away my guest right now, but
I'm excited. I have an idea of who it could be. I'm excited.
So, Jeremy, once again, thank you. You bring so much to these, and that's why I'm glad that you wanted to talk about Rocky. And last season, you brings up so much depth and information and intelligence to these conversations. Where can you be found?
Jeremy Paul Adams on YouTube, Jeremy Paul Adams on Facebook, and always, watch the Movie Trivia Schmodown, for which I am involved as a question writer.
And you can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Also, I am a film critic, like I alluded to, for a website called disappointmentmedia.com. Don't at me. I didn't come up with the name. I just write for them. It's DISIPPIONTMEDIA. Not a lot of movies out in theaters. I have been knocking out a couple of reviews here and there. My Spy, Artemis Fowl, You Should Have Left. None of them three are worth go and see. I recommend not seeing any of those three movies about you folks out there watching. But I have been doing some retrospectives, 30th anniversaries, 25th anniversaries, 20th anniversaries, movies of old movies like Gladiator, Braveheart, a Pretty Woman, and I'm going to be doing a bunch more as the year goes on. So keep an eye out for those. Also, I like doing reviews of movies if somebody dies, like Brian Dennehy died. I did Rambo. Irfan Khan died. I did Slumdog Millionaire. So I kind of like doing that. Revisit some of their films a little bit.
If you decide to do The Jerk, having just lost Carl Reiner, I would love to do that with you. That's one of my favorite comedies.
I wouldn't mind doing something. We'll think about what I could do for Carl Reiner. But for Jeremy and myself, good evening, everybody.